Micro Frontends for us, DAZN has been a journey, and today I want to tell you this story. This story is about the evolution of a front-end architecture. And this story started roughly 2018, 2019. I was on a stage in Amsterdam telling about what we were trying to do at very early stages. And before 2019, we didn't even have a name for the micro frontends. We were just doing all the things with the front end. We are just attempting to scale the front end. So in 2019, we started this journey, and this journey continued to evolve. So our story today will start from 2019, where we're going to set up the context. The context is key to understand the decision we took and which were the pros and the cons and all the reasoning on those decisions. And then we're going to see how those decisions changed over the years and why they changed. And at the end, I want to leave a bit of time to talk about sharing code and ideas. There are two different concepts that I will touch, but very important, and we'll do it at the end. Introduction first, my name is Max. I'm a distinguished engineer in DAZN. You can find me on maxgallo.io or on Twitter, X, on _maxgallo. Chapter 1, Once Upon a Time. Once upon a time, there was a live sports streaming company named DAZN. DAZN is now relatively popular depending on the country. We are a global service operating 24/7, and we stream live sports. In 2018, 2019, DAZN was operating in just a couple of countries, Germany, and we just launched in Japan. And the first application for the front end and the back end has been developed by a third-party company. So when I joined, we had the mission to create the engineering department, which is it's huge. I was the third developer hired for that. We're now like 1,000. So it was a very big challenge. And as you can imagine, the very first period was a period of exponential growth. If you ever lived in a period where your company was going through exponential growth, you know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, imagine that every week, every month, there are new teams, there are departments growing, so there is a lot of movement. How can we have all these people problem of showing up teams being reflected into the architecture? How can we help the exponential growth with code? What we did, very simple. We had a simple page application developed by the third-party company, which was a monolith, which was working perfectly fine. And what we started to do was like, okay, we have a big thing and we want to favor the growth of this big thing. So let's split it. So far, nothing new. I think it goes back to the Romans divide and conquer. You've seen it millions of times. Nothing new so far. But we wanted to push it further. Why we are doing things and which decision did we took. But let's pause for a second, because before we start this journey, in the middle of the journey, we need a map. Every journey, you need a map, otherwise you don't know what you're doing. Your map is probably not like this, it's more like on your phone. Our map today is called Micro Frontend Decision Framework. I stole this from a friend of mine because I think it's very useful to understand the different concept of decisions that you made while using Micro Frontends. And some decisions may be conscious, some other may be unconscious, but you took them at some point. You had to decide each of these four aspects. We have definition, composition, routing, and communication. I'm going to start with definition. We have two ways of defining microfrontends. We have the vertical microfrontend on the left-hand side, where you have a single view and a single theme. That easy. Single view owned by a single team, multiple views, multiple pages, it doesn't matter. But then another view kicks in and there is another team responsible for it. Nice and easy. And then we have the horizontal one, when multiple teams are working on the same page because you are sharing just a part of the view. What are the pros and cons into doing this? Vertical has a much clearer ownership and from end to end. Imagine if you are the team working on one entire page and you want to change your rendering library, do it. Who cares? The other team is on a different page, so they're not going to be bothered by your decision. Great ownership and freedom. And then it's easier to support. If you work for a product or a company that needs to support 24/7 and you are up at 2 a.m. in the morning because something went south, having a single team responsible for a page is freaking great. Paging 5 teams to understand what's going on? Not fun. Sometimes needed, but not fun. Horizontal, you can release a part of the view, and it favors reusability a lot. In the concept of vertical micro frontends, you're not reusing much. You have the entire view and you switch between that view over the user journey. For the horizontal one, there is much more reusability. And with this reusability, we're going to touch on the same concept that I mentioned for the vertical one, that for the vertical, it's easier to manage. For the horizontal one, it's a bit harder. You have multiple teams coordinating together, making some decision and agreements together, for good or for worse. You may have to go to horizontal, or you may have to go to the vertical one, but it's important that you think about this choice. And then we have composition. How are we putting these Lego bricks together? So on the y-axis, we have on the origin, so on your server, and we have the edge, your CDN, and the client. These are the three components and the three places where you can do the composition, putting all these Lego bricks together. For server-side composition, we are doing this on the origin. So on your server, on your origin, you are putting the Lego bricks together and you're forming the page, whatever it looks like, single or multiple. And that's quite important because when it comes to the edge, so on your CDN and on your client, it's already well formed, which means it's highly cacheable. You can sustain a lot of traffic with this setup, as long as your origin server is capable of handling that. That's, of course, a decision that you have to make, but please consider the server-side composition. If you go to the edge-side composition, we are going one step down. So on the origin, we have the Lego bricks scattered together. They could be even on different servers. You don't care. Then on the edge, you do the composition. And this is something that 10 years ago, it wasn't exactly possible or wasn't that popular. Nowadays, we have all sorts of edge functions from different platforms and manufacturers, which will help you doing this. There is also a standard called ESI, which IKEA was using, which was used to compose these things, which was quite powerful. It didn't get a lot of traction, but there are possibilities to do that. Lambda at the edge, CloudFront function, CloudFront workers, you name it. You can put those things together. From the client perspective, the client is dumb. It doesn't know how to distinguish between the first one and the second one we observe. It just received the whole thing. Cacheability here, of course, is different, and you're working on the edge. Last is client-side composition. So your origin is Lego bricks, edge, again, Lego bricks scattered on the floor. But this means that you can cache individual pieces one by one. Then they go to the client, and at the client level, they get composed together. This may seem trivial, but in the context of DAZN, we had huge spikes in our traffic. So we had to make a lot of this decision based on the cacheability of the different components, because we already have some challenges on the back end. We didn't want to face the same challenges on the front end, or at least reducing them. So composition, very important. Think about your cache strategy, your client support. If your client are crap, you're working only with really old web-based set-top boxes or weird devices, the client-side composition may be too heavy. In some cases, it may be too heavy. If you are lucky enough to work mostly on web, it's fine. Web can handle almost everything nowadays. Then we have routing. Routing is, I've got a URL, I need to go somewhere. If you're doing the routing on the origin or on the server, you can do that in both horizontal and vertical. You just call the backend, and the backend does everything. So not a lot of thinking here. That's nice and easy. Think always about scalability. Routing on the edge is more tricky. It's not always super common, but there's a very interesting case which I want to tell you quickly, which is canary releases or A/B testing. So if your request or /sign-in is hitting your CDN, at CDN level, you can decide actually 50% of the traffic I want to go to this, and 50% will get this one. And this is beautiful because your origin, your server, is not even aware that that is happening. There is no technology connection happening, alignment, none whatsoever. And that's quite powerful. You can also do routing on the client. By doing that, you need to download app shell, which will do the routing for you. So you download this sort of app shell, very minimal layer that does the routing and checks. Are you signing in? Would you like to go to this URL? Are you already signed in user? So I don't want to present the signing page, etc., etc. So then we have our communication, which is still part of the decision framework. Communication is how do we have these Lego bricks communicating with each other. In case of vertical, we have big vertical micro frontends. They communicate one with another through browser storage, through URL params, anything that gets sticky into your session. For the horizontal one, it's more challenging because you may have to have runtime communication since you have multiple micro frontends on the same page. The runtime communication could be event bus, super popular to communicate between frontends, micro frontends, or host config. If you have this sort of parent-children relationship in the micro frontend words, which could happen, you can have the parent passing down some props. If you're familiar with React, same thing. So communication really, really important, especially in the horizontal case. In the vertical, it's a bit easier. And that's it. That was our map for the decision framework. So when you're jumping into the micro frontend world, or maybe you already did that, you took those decisions somehow. And whether you are aware or not, it doesn't matter, but you took them because you had to decide those things. And for us, like we didn't have this framework. This came a year later. So we took those decisions. They would say, oh, that's a nice way of putting it. So this is going to be our map for the journey. Let's play again. We were talking about DAZN, hypergrowth, and people that new teams that need to be onboarded and working efficiently on the platform. So what we decided for is that if you go to www.dazn.com, you were downloading a client-side orchestrator, and you start hearing memories from the map, the decision framework that we just saw. So this client-side orchestrator is a tiny index.html layer that does the front-end side orchestrator. So what it does, it loads landing page. You hit www.dazn.com, you're not authenticated. So I'm going to show you the landing page. The landing page is our vertical micro frontend. It occupies the whole page. And then your landing page team, which is our team A, our beautiful team A, has clear KPI objectives. Are those landing pages personalized? There is some dark magic going on in there. The other micro frontends do not care. They have very clear objectives and goal from a business perspective. And once they are successful, it means that the user landed on the authorization micro frontends, which again, we unmount the whole micro frontending page and we mount it without reloading the page. This is the white part doing the job here. And this is owned by Team B. KPIs for Team B are conversion rate, how many users are giving up during the sign-up process, sign-in, the usual. But we have a team which is responsible for that. So it's much easier from a business perspective to go to that team and talk about conversion rate and all the other metrics from an authentication and authorization perspective. But what is this small layer that we actually call the front-end orchestrator? These are the only 3 lines of code I'm going to show in the whole presentation. So the first one is fetch request, which fetches the landing page index.html. So actually, this landing page looks like it could be a normal single-page application. Nothing fancy here. And then we get all the elements in the body. And what we do is we mount each of the elements of the body in the new body of the body of the response in the body of the current page. And that's it, really. The complex part of this white area here is not this one. This is like one file in the real code base, not these 3 lines, but it's literally one file. There are other complexity, like you've got no idea how hard it is to get the right language and country, but that's a different story. Ask me later. And we talk about the white part. We want to talk about the vertical micro frontend. What are they from a practical perspective? They are a single page application, which is fantastic for new joiners. I don't have to explain crazy new shenanigans. You are a new joiners. You work most likely on an application that is a single page app. Just build another one. We just load it in a slightly different way, but you are a new team, you are working on single page application, you can do that on day 1. You can be effective for the hypergrowth on day 1. And then we have a business subdomain, which touch that with really KPIs and a really easy to grasp concept. And of course, it's owned by a single team. So the recap is that the runtime of 2019 front-end architecture is that you hit www.dazn.com, we load the white, the front-end orchestrator, which loads the micro frontends, deciding based on the context, which could be which URL you type, are you signed in, or many other concepts. And we had 5, 6, 7 of them. I think 6. We have landing pages, authentication, catalog, my account. We split those and we gave to each of these team autonomy into saying, are you from landing page team? You can deploy independently. You have your own build pipeline, you have your own timelines, and the auth team is not even aware of what you're doing. And that's a good thing. So what is our decision framework? We got our map, now we're working, let's use our map. So definition, we are using vertical micro frontends. And that's easy, full page, great accountability. And for us, it was super important to be able to support 24/7, especially with matches in Japan or boxes event all over the globe. Composition is a client-side orchestrator. So the client side's always downloaded in page, the white part. And once it's downloaded, it compose and include the things on the page, mounts the different microfrontends on the page. Routing is again the client side. So you can start seeing that our solution was very heavy on the client side. And communication is web storage. We use vast majority of the time local storage, sometimes even the window object. So that was our 2019 decision framework applied, and that's it. They live happily ever after. Nope. I wish it was like that. But companies evolve, business evolves, and the way we tackle those challenges is something that keeps evolving all the time. So we needed to adapt to a change. And that's true for our architecture, it's true for your architecture, for decisions that you take. Every few years, you may have to reevaluate certain things. Let's see what we had to reevaluate and what we had to just take it as it was from the beginning. First of all, it's not easy to define domain boundaries. When I told you, oh, we pick landing page, auth, and we split into that, that's not a super easy process. Some of them may be extremely familiar to you and you recognize, oh, of course, I've got my app which has L pages. L pages feels like its own subdomain, easy. Is the live chat part of the help pages? Yeah, maybe. Is sign in and sign up part of the same flow? Are those two flows? That is in the detail. You may end up having a lot of discussion. The clear aspect is that how are you splitting your team? It starts from people. So if you have multiple teams working on the same micro frontends, we defeated the whole purpose. So in some cases, we actually had precisely this problem. Too many teams were working on the same micro frontends, and we were organizing release trains and all the other things, which are not bad per se, but it wasn't what we programmed to do, what we wanted for this architecture to help us with. So we had multiple teams coordinating releases. You can imagine the rollback, et cetera, et cetera. We said, okay, in a couple of cases, that was easy. For example, we split sign in and sign up. I did that example not by choice, not randomly, because it was too big, two different areas, and conceptually signing in and signing up are very two different process. Is your company big enough to have two distinct process or a single team for both? It's your answer. For us, we decided to split them, and that was easy because we didn't have to change the architecture. We readapted our subdomain boundaries. But then we started growing an entire department, not a team, which was the playback department. If you work with live streaming, you know that the most important thing you want to show the user is the player. They don't care about all your shenanigans, all your JS, HTML. They want to see the live match. That's the most important thing. If everything else falls apart, the player has to be there and working. So if you have read team topologies, the player in the zone context is a perfect definition of a complex subsystem because there was not a team behind it. There was a bloody department which was growing and growing. So you can imagine that having the player team releasing hot fixes or a lot of changes and having to coordinate with catalog, because player back then was just a component imported by catalog, started to fall apart a little bit. So let's go back to this slide where we have actually vertical microfrontends. Yes, we are doing that, but maybe it's time to explore the other option, the horizontal one. And back when we started, we didn't have a lot of options that we can just pick off the shelf. Nowadays, we would probably go with module federation, single SPA. There are a lot of opportunities right now. But back then, we didn't have an option. So we had to create one, which is not crazy difficult. far from it, and it's based on system.js. It's very similar to actual module federation nowadays. We have this relationship with the host. So the player is a Micro Frontend, which is represented and owned by a team B. And then we have the vertical one. We didn't have to remove that part of the architecture. We introduced another layer. The team A was responsible for catalog, and catalog is the host. Player is being hosted inside catalog. So there is a relationship with the host. As you can imagine, we're passing some props and communication and all sort of things. And then we have full autonomy over non-breaking changes. So player is included into catalog. So of course, if the contract changes, we have to change the whole thing. But 99 point something percent of the time, player releases autonomously. And that's something that we needed a lot. Why? Because we changed the structure of the teams internally. At the beginning, we didn't have exactly a playback department. It grew, so we had to have our architecture to reflect what changes we did within the whole organization. And so our 2025 front-end architecture is slightly different, but not completely brand new. We have the vertical micro front-end, which is still there, and we still have landing pages, auth, catalog, etc. And then inside it, we have some special horizontal micro front-ends, which we know they are a bit harder to manage and to deal with, but they serve a purpose, which is very useful for us. So we have player, stats, and a few others. Not so many, because we don't want to have too many teams working on every single page experience from the users. But this is how we end up with. So we take the vertical, we added the horizontal one, and we had both of them working together. So let's revisit the decision framework. Definition is now both. We have vertical as the groundbreaking and foundational decision of what we load as entire views. And then inside it, in some cases, we also leverage horizontal micro frontends, which part of the view can be deployed autonomously by different teams. Composition still happening entirely on the client. We compose both vertical and horizontal, no changes there. Routing, the same, still happening on the client side with the orchestrator. And communication is very similar to us, is web storage plus the host config for ensuring the micro frontends, the horizontal ones, are always respecting the contract from their parents. And that was our transition from 2018, 2019 to nowadays. So we adapted following certain changes that were happening at company level. And I want to end this talk with a note about sharing and what were we sharing, how were we sharing, because being autonomous and having teams working independently is fantastic. But sometimes if you have done this in a very precise and perfect way, you end up with different problems. You end up with multiple teams that have no clue what the others are doing, which someone may say, oh, well, it's actually fantastic. You are full autonomous team. Yeah, yes, that's what we wanted, but you don't want too much autonomy. Well, you want autonomy, but you don't want these knowledge silos being created that you have no clue whatsoever what the team sitting next to you is actually doing about. So these knowledge silos, it's something you can uh, plan against, and you can do something about it. In our case, we did some internal meetups where you were able to present the latest thing you were using in your micro frontend, your decisions. And the good thing about this is that it was detached by the normal business as usual. If you want to release something, autonomy, independence, fantastic. You want to share your latest snapshot library that you're using, which helped you in some cases, that's a separate talk. It's not connected necessarily to the business, but it helps for the sharing. And I also want to shout out to all the individual contributors like principal engineers, staff engineers, tech leaders, distinguished, whoever you have it, you have those figures in your companies that are able to go from one team to another, or that they usually work on multiple teams. They are a key to figure out if the teams are completely diverging, if there is something that should be shared and communicated. So those are the key people you need to rely on, we need to rely on in order to create this knowledge share. And last, plan it. I know you may have some fantastic devs that are all about sharing and telling the entire world what they're doing, but you may not have them. And statistically speaking, you're not having them right now because there are just a few of those devs which are so outspoken and being able to tell everyone what they're doing. So what you have to do is plan for sharing. There are these techniques, there are way more, but please consider the fact that you need to do something proactively, not years after. And beyond basically sharing what you were doing, I also suggest you to have a look at something like this, which is, I don't know if you have heard of Backstage from Spotify, which is an internal tool that many company uses, and it got popular in the microservices world. It acts like a catalog of things present and available in your company. So you have the list of microservices, you have the teams who owns that, you have the rota, who is on call, what are the logs, what's the error budget, what services they support, etc., etc. You have a lot of contextual information to those microservices. With Micro Frontends, it's very similar. You still have a fragmented ecosystem, and you need to work on the discoverability. It's not a single page anymore. The front end is in that repo. Go there, press build, and it works. Not anymore. There are a lot of downside, and you may end up having to pay a high price for them if you don't plan for a good discoverability and ideas sharing. So Backstage is one tool. There are more, but please consider the idea that in the moment you split something big into multiple pieces, people have to know where are those pieces, who's responsible for them, what do they mean, etc., etc. So this is a very good tool that I would suggest. And at the beginning, we talked a little bit about sharing, not sharing, and the hypergrowth. So we are now sharing more ideas with all these techniques, with Backstage, et cetera, et cetera. But should we also share code, like literally a shared library or something like that? In the context of DAZN, at the very beginning, we decided to favor team independence. So when we were in hypergrowth, we had a landing page team, which working on landing pages with their KPI, et cetera, and the authentication team. And both teams, they had visually the same header. We had two options on the table. Option one, we create a shared library. We would leverage design systems and a lot of great techniques that are helping you in that regard. But what we didn't want to was to put a lock between these two teams. Because in the moment you're sharing something, even if you do it in the best way possible, you are making assumptions. You need to have these two teams talking with each other, for good or for worse. I'm not saying this is always bad. For us, we didn't want to do that. So what we did is we asked the team, please duplicate the code. We had 5 or 6 versions of our header. No real user noticed that. Yes, we wasted a few lines of code, but none of the teams had to talk with other teams in order to be independent during hypergrowth. And that was our key objectives. And one aspect of this is that because this has been super controversial over the years, and it was like sometimes we focus on duplication as a goal. Oh, my goal is to not duplicate code. Ish, that's a tool, it's an instrument. You use that for another purpose. You don't duplicate because it could be risky, because there could be more bugs, because it's a very complex thing. The header is not complex. We were okay to duplicate the header. If it was something more like the player, not on this planet, we would never actually duplicate something that crucial. So make your decision, but in our case, the autonomy was more important in that moment. And it's funny to say that up to today, we don't have a single visual component which is shared across all the micro frontends. So our good old footer and header, they're still duplicated in a few places. And it's okay. We also went through a major UI revamp, which required a little bit of coordination, part of the game. But all of this has a very powerful word at the end, and I like that it's at the end because it like opens a billion doors. Like everything you said is nonsense. No, actually, everything I said with that context made sense, but Nowadays, the context is different. Nowadays, for DAZN, we're not in hypergrowth anymore. We're much more stable. The teams are much more stable. And there is an overall approach to say maybe it's time to share something. We're still not sharing visual component yet. In some cases, we are trying to, but we are sharing some things which are reflecting the company priorities. And company priorities are payments. If you work with payments and you've done PCI audit, that's not something you want to duplicate here and there. You don't want to double check your payment flows in multiple pages. That's a nightmare. Analytics, that's a funny one. At some point, we had analytics not always shared since day one. So we ended up having landing page reporting country as Italy, authentication Micro Frontend reporting country as IT, and help pages reporting country as Italia. And you can imagine how happy it was the data team to having to shuffle all those things together. It was a nightmare. So it's like, okay, you know what? Forget about the autonomy and freedom for analytics. There is one way. The country is expressed in one way all the time, and many other params on top of that. So analytics is something that we had to share. And experiment. If you're using an experimentation tool, it's most likely one tool across the whole front end, sometimes even front end and back end. But it's very important that you don't create multiple experiment tools. First of all, because the experiment results could go nuts if you have multiple experiment tools working together. And most importantly, also because from a business perspective, are you going to make a contract with LaunchDarkly, with Optimizely, with X, with Y, and different team uses different things? No, that's really a nightmare. So for experiment and a few other things, we decided to share, and that's fine, but that was a business decision. So I want to leave you with three takeaways. And the first one is that your business subdomains, they changed for us and they will change for you. And they have changed during the years for everyone. So your microfrontends, which are reflecting your business subdomain, needs to evolve, are not immutable. They will change and you have to adapt them towards your company and your priorities. Second is that sharing code is a solution, is not a goal. Please focus on solution and goal as two very different aspects in a conversation. Sometimes something which is flagged as always bad may actually be okay because there is a trade-off. And last but not least, vast majority of these things that we did was to enable people to work in the best way possible. So at the end of the day, there were some business constraints, but the idea of splitting one microfront end or to give autonomy is for the teams to work better. So it's always about the people. You have to talk with them, you have to listen to them and adapt to what they are doing and how they are changing. And that was the last slide. Thank you very much.